Mike here, Money, Marriage, and Media, and you know what we're here doing? We're back with the ladies again, right? Breaking down some more high-level conversations. This time, the conversation is about are you family oriented? But specifically for them, because it's a panel of ladies, you have to ask yourself, are you a family oriented woman? Now, I think this question applies to both genders. Realistically, though, most men are family oriented, but it may not appear like that from the woman's perspective, because you got to realize is that guys, because we want to be the head of the household, a lot of times the way we interpret the definition that we use for family, that's what you got to figure out if you agree with that man's definition of family. Because a lot of guys don't, there's a lot of guys out there that won't include marriage in the definition of family. So they cool with you being a baby mama. It's a small percentage of guys. It's less than 20%, but they're out there. So you got to be careful with that. But let's get it going and see what the ladies are talking about.
If you're a family oriented woman. And you have to really honestly be honest about that. Like, if you are a family oriented woman and you care about your family, it's not going to feel like sacrifice to you. Like my
That's
kids,
true.
I have three of them, went through C-sections. Someone would say, why the hell would you do that 3 times? I didn't look at it as sacrifice. I didn't look at it as I'm throwing my body away because it was something that I wanted to do. You have to want to do it. You have to have a desire, a love, and like something that's beyond self. And so I talked about this on another panel that I was on. I think that the modern day woman, they there's a lot of things that are fed from society that are self-serving. So like marriage now, the modern day marriage looks like, oh, happiness, or oh, you have to be like happy all the time, or this ideal image, or this like, platonic ideal of what a house.
I'm glad she brought up marriage because her first example of childbirth, it is a good example because most women can relate to it. But the real example is the marriage, because in a lot of ways that requires more compromise. Because the way you raise your kid, if you're a single mom, well, you're 100% gonna raise the kids the way you want to. But working within the confines of a marriage takes actual work, and there's an actual standard. And a lot of times that the women are not, they're not a part of. Because again, the man leads. Most women want a man who leads the household. Okay, well that means that you're following his standards. And I'm gonna be honest, a lot of women, they don't want to sign up for that. I mean, but that's what comes with being in a family, though. This comes, well, if you want to get married, the guy's gonna have standards. If you want a guy to lead, then that means that he's gonna have a vision of how he sees his family. Now, does that mean that it's 100% his way or the highway? No, right? And we as men, we know this, right? The average men, we know this. That's why a lot of times that we're not afraid to compromise. That's why we value your opinion. Now, that does that mean that we're always going to listen to you? No, it doesn't. And I think a lot of times women struggle with that. This is where you get the whole. Okay, look, we're getting off topic. Let's keep going.
Household looks like versus the reality of it and everything like that. So like when you really care about your kids, you care about your husband, you care about all of that, you're not looking at it as sacrifice. And that's somebody that's like been like when I was married, it wasn't sacrifice for me to go behind my husband and do things that are going to make his life easier. And in turn, because he sees that, he's willing to sacrifice as well. And so I think that it has to be a collaborative sacrifice. Even everything that we look across the board, even like religion, God calls for us to sacrifice. And in turn, we pay that price with receiving eternal life. So
Okay,
like
she's
there's a
rambling.
lot of things that require sacrifice.
Everything
Javar,
requires sacrifice.
Javar.
Okay, so y'all touched on a whole bunch of points, right? But I'm going to say first and foremost, like your happiness. We talked about mental health earlier here. Like people die because their hearts are hurt or they're depressed or they're unhealthy. Like your happiness is your life force, right? So to sacrifice that for the sake of say the family, I think there's a thousand ways to skin a cat. Like the kids will be okay if you have two parents who really care about the kids. There's way I know people who they spend holidays together. The husband to go stay the night at the wife's house, or vice versa, and they stay with the kids. Like the kids will be okay if that's the goal, to make your kids happy, successful, adults in the world. So the sacrifice, like just being happy, doesn't it? I don't agree with it at all. Obviously, like Miss Tagan said, there are points in relationships where people we might like each other right now. We're going through something, and you work through it if the purpose is to work through what you're working.
This woman sounds like she's not going to compromise on anything. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like she's not willing to bend on anything. This literally is probably the man that she is married to. If she's married, I would be interested to meet that brother, because I would want to know, like, how. Well, maybe it's different. Maybe it's different at home, but the way she's talking, it makes it seem like she is the head of her household, and I'm not compromising on anything. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
But I think a lot of people, like, we're pushing this whole idea of get married, start a family, but it's like even within that or before that, like you have to have your.
That's the whole point. Life is about people. And your purpose is to prepare the next generation. Well, what's more important than family? I don't know. My family is pretty important to me. My legacy, living on, me raising my children and getting grandkids, that's pretty high priority for me. So like I said, I'd be interested to know what she has going on that's more important than that. So
purpose and life set, so like if you with somebody and we understand what we're really going towards, if your goal is specifically to be together, like, I really want to have kids, I really want to raise these kids a certain way, and that's the goal or your purpose in getting married, that's one thing. Or if your purpose is something bigger, to build a community, or to, people have different goals and purposes in life, but stick to that. You might have an individual thing, but yeah, your happiness, no, you have to do that to survive, like, life. And
Javar, you said something about mental health, and I couldn't help but to think about, and maybe this is extreme, but I don't think this is extreme. This was a common thing that happened before postpartum was talked about in medication and therapy. I think about Andrea Yates, how she just kept popping out babies after babies after babies for her husband, while he wasn't a bad husband, he wasn't abusive, he was just working a lot and he was gone, and she was at home with those children, and he did not recognize the signs of postpartum can last up to 2 years. So she's just had baby after baby after baby, and her mental health kept declining, and she was unhappy to the point where postpartum, I don't think men really understand postpartum depression. They don't understand that you can start hallucinating. You can start seeing things that are not there. You start hearing things. You'll start seeing your kids differently. Like, it is extreme. And that's why the hospitals are very, very adamant and hard on postpartum and identifying the signs. Every time you take your baby to go get a checkup, they're asking you, and check out this list and check out these boxes. How are you feeling? Do you feel like you want to die? Do you feel like all these things? Do you think about suicide thoughts? Do you think about harming your...
Okay. She's contradicting herself. You can't on one hand say, well, I don't think men understand this this psychological issue, but then say that's why the hospitals have you fill out this questionnaire. Yet they have you fill out the questionnaire because postpartum depression is hard to catch. So on one hand, we're saying that the men don't understand, but at the other hand is that, well, Yeah, the hospital, they want you to fill out this questionnaire because it's important. Yeah, because they have a hard time diagnosing it. And, excuse me, but so, okay, let me back up here and let me add some context. I studied psychology in college. It's just a bachelor's degree. It doesn't mean I'm licensed or anything like that. But one of the things that I did discover through research is that that survey that they have you fill out, that doesn't tell them that you have postpartum depression. All that does is say, hey, you might need to sit down and talk to a licensed professional. That's all it does. It's not a diagnosis. Because again, the doctor that you see or the doctor that you see, they're going to want to make their own diagnosis after you sit down and talk to them for at least an hour. And it may be that they ask you, okay, well, they say that at the end of that hour, they say that, okay, there may or may not be something here. We want to have you come back for another session just to be sure. So this whole notion that your man, your husband, is going to be able to see all this stuff around, that's not realistic. And yes, the symptoms that she's talking about, they are very much real. But that's why the hospital, they ask you those questions, because too many times it goes undiagnosed and there's not enough time to make a proper diagnosis. So it literally is a phishing tool that they're using to say, okay, well, we want to make sure, we want to be thorough and say that we tried. And particularly if the hospital is doing it and it's mandatory, I would think that at some point there was some legal action that they're trying to avoid.
Your baby, and they'll have you rate it on a scale of 1 to 5 to help identify if you have postpartum depression and how serious it is. And for us to not acknowledge that when we say women should choose, family first, I think this was a woman who kept giving her husband what he wanted, and no one was helping her, and she was doing her wifely duties and her motherly duties until she snapped and drowned all 5 of her children. And then,
okay, I know who she's talking about now. And again, we like to use these extreme examples because how many people are having 5 kids? That's not the norm. The fact that you have 5 kids is not the norm. The fact that the depression continued against that whole time, again, not the norm. So, I hate to make it seem like I'm just dismissing it altogether. But again, the thing that we have to understand is that when you're talking in YouTube period, right, you're literally talking to thousands of people at a time. This is not the place for nuanced arguments. Because again, that is literally what you're saying needs to apply to a multitude of people.
It actually was a common thing. That's why all these things are in place to protect the children. Because a lot of women, probably some women to this day, probably got away with harming their children because it wasn't something. Postpartum wasn't a thing. So what do y'all say about that? Does that still count? If a woman
I think it's an extreme. I know like what you did, that was an extreme situation, but there are many women that do go through postpartum. So it's serious. But I do think mental health is what we were referring to, at least I thought, was just a general consensus of a healthy woman and a healthy man coming together in a relationship.
I think that I was, but then you also, when we say that in the same breath, because I agree, I don't disagree with anything that you ladies had to say. I think it's just like when we think about it from men are saying, you hear men say, it doesn't matter about your happiness doesn't matter. Your purpose is to be a wife and a mother to my kids, take care of the home, take care of the kids. Some women may develop mental illness.
Again, she's in an extreme argument. Because why? You notice she preferenced it with, okay, let's set the narrative here. What she's talking about is a narrative to where the man is responsible for the woman's mental health issues. Because again, well, you saying, well, Mike, I didn't see that. I heard she's making legitimate claims. Okay. If she is, then why isn't she talking about men's mental health? You know, men's mental health is actually a men's issue. It's a big one too. It's important. But again, you notice she didn't address it. But she prefaced her responses to saying that the man is getting what he wants, and what he wants, she's saying it like there's a correlation, because if you give a man what he wants, it's going to lead to you being mentally unhealthy. The gender war is dumb. From what she's saying, how is that supposed to help couples get together? See what I said? This is what I mean when I say about the gender war being perpetuated. She's using an extreme example, and she's trying to connect the dots of it being the fault of the men. Got to call this stuff out, people. Got to call it out, because otherwise, this is what black men are talking about when we say that we had 40 years of having to put up with this stuff in the media, because statements like that go unchecked and nobody says anything, and the men just have to eat it.
Just like a man can develop mental illness and hurt his family, but it was more common with women because of the science behind it after giving birth to a child.
No, it's more common in women, because when you're a man, nobody wants to hear about your mental health issues unless they're a licensed professional and you went there going to seek help. But most men are not going to do that. They're going to try and talk to people they're familiar with first. The problem is that a lot of times you get the door shut in your face. Just what it is. That's why I say, guys, women are not equipped to handle masculine problems. That's where a network of men can come in handy. You go talk to your guy friends about your masculine problems, because women very rarely have an understanding of a male experience.
There's literally a chemical imbalance behind a woman.
Yeah, I had even read a study too, like, which actually shocked me, was more along the lines, like, I was looking up like abuse, parental abusive rates, and like basically who abused more. And in my mind, and I had to check myself, like, oh, why did I even think like that? But I assumed that it was men or fathers or dads who were more abusive to children. And I guess because I tie the whole discipline thing, with them, I'm like trying to understand my thought. But when I looked up the stats, it is more women. Women are more abusive to children than men. Right. And so I do think not to negate the fact that postpartum or mental health isn't an issue. It absolutely is. So I don't want to take away from that. But like I said, I thought we were talking just in a general sense of two healthy people. If you have mental health issues, I don't necessarily know if you have the mental capacity to determine between what sacrifice is. Like, you're just trying to get from day to day, and you're just moving, through life, so to speak, and whatever comes at you, come what may. But in a situation with mental health, I think that's a whole different conversation would need to be had.
Ms. Takey, I think what we're forgetting is you might not start off like that, but declining happiness will cause your mental health to decline as well. So,
and you can't make this stuff up. So what about the vast majority of women who receive happiness from children and family? Yeah, extremes. This is why conversations like this are so important. We did get some accountability here, because that was good. I like it when the women can hold each other accountable, have high level conversations. But that whole thing about that narrative is we got to start calling that out, because she cleaned it up a little bit in the end, B. Taylor, when she came back and talked about men's mental health. But look at the amount of time that she spent on men's mental health versus the women, and how she prefaced it. You know, I'm talking about. There's another video where where I'm reviewing. I am Courtney Michelle's content, and I talk about, you know, once you see a narrative or once you learn the male perspective, you can't unsee certain things. This is one of those times. So, but look, great conversation. We will be back with the ladies again, I promise, because again, like I said, high level conversations, and that's what we're looking for. That's the goal. So I'm gonna stay ghost to the next time. Peace. Thanks for making it to the end of this video. But do me another favor, like and subscribe, but also check out these here. Either subscribe or watch videos, one or the other. I don't know which side, but hey, all right.